Yeah.
You know, sometimes I would like to be able to take some of the extremes out of the balance, but there is balance.
Well, yeah, no, I think that's the whole point of what we do on the path is that things tend to go to extremes, and recognizing when we are extreme and pulling back before we go over the cliff, as opposed
to understanding that this is a cycle and just leaning forward into it and finishing that crying rant out and moving onward.
And this too will change. Things are not static. And I think because we think in terms of the whole being in balance, we also need to recognize I can be really in balance in this part of my life and wildly out of balance over here.
Sure.
At the same time.
Sure. Yeah, times 40 different aspects of our life, certainly. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that has helped me with when I am thinking as magical Dave, I am always thinking as the same magical Dave, where in my mundane life, sure, I have a whole bunch of different aspects and facets, but I think that's one of the things that has been so calming for me getting back involved with the podcast and whatnot, is because the more time I spend in my magical mind, the more I understand that my mundane mind is just a scared rabbit running around like the rest of us. But magically, I am wonderful and fine and sage.
Okay, which makes sense. And there are and I think the longer you hang out on the path, you will discover there are probably as many aspects of magical Dave as there are mundane Dave.
Right now, I am just completely infatuated with any connection I can make to the magical, and it's making a difference in my life.
That's the important piece. So that seems like a good point to wrap that one up.
Sure, yeah. I mean, when's the next black moon? Can you tell me that off the top of your head, or
no? But
I probably just put you on the spot anyway.
Yeah, probably.
I'll tell you what. Let's put that one out for the podcast, folks. Here in the next few weeks, just a little teaser, but we're going to be starting out a Discord community, through Patreon and whatnot. So start doing your research, and maybe we could have our listeners help us compile a list of when the next blue moon is, and when the next black moon is, and when the next
supermoon.
Supermoon. Yeah, thank you. Yep.
Eclipse. Fun piece.
Anyway,
if you
be
find
safe,
an interesting,
be well, and be loved.
And if you find an interesting lunar occurrence that we haven't been talking about, shoot us an email about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Either Dave or Elizabeth at Two Young Crones, and we'll get right back to you.
Thank you much, and you have a blessed day, as you like to say, and as I like to say, may you have mirth and reverence in all things.
In all things.
Witchstones are a divination tool we created as part of our practice that deals with what we call concrete stones, specific types and kinds of energy, and conceptual stones, things and ideas about witchcraft, which can be read with either a seen or an unseen meaning. Recently, we have developed a set of oracle cards using this information. We would like to introduce you to one of these stones right now.
In today's Witchstone Spotlight, we'll be looking at the stone card for Witchblood. Concept stones focus on an aspect of the craft rather than a specific physical energy. The Witchblood stone is the 6th of 8 mental concept stones of the Witchstone Oracle that relate to the energy of thoughts or processes. It displays a pictograph of a red drop of blood surrounded by a white and black border. The border being split tells us that this is a concept card. The border being white over black, or air over earth, tells us that this card represents a mental concept. We who are walking the path believe that every practicing witch has witch blood inside of themselves, which is awakened and grows stronger over time and with study and actually practicing their craft. There are some who practice who believe they are hereditary witches with a lineage that goes back into the dim and distant past, and that anyone else cannot possibly be a witch. However, if you consider humanity's genetics as a whole, some small part of your makeup must contain the seeds of witchcraft. After all, we all have junk DNA inside of us, which is non-coding DNA. Scientists recognize that it comprises about 3/4 of our DNA, but they have no idea what most of it does or why we have it. Perhaps this is where the witchblood, the spiritual component to our DNA, is existing, just waiting in each of us to be brought to life, which magically connects us as all awakening practitioners. Witchblood is that connection that calls to the elements, the genus loci, spirit of place, the old gods and ancestors, and the divine, and which is recognized as belonging to a spiritual seeker who wants to create change within themselves and through their world of magic. Awakening witchblood is an internal process, so the energy in this case is receptive. These changes happen as a person's practice develops over time and with sincere effort. Working with one's past and developing connections with others may also be part of this process. As it is receptive, its energy is associated with the dark half of the year. The Witchblood Stone card associates with the new or dark moon. The Witchblood represents thoughts and ideas when reflecting on the element of air. The Witchblood card represents personal development when reflecting on the element of earth. In a reading, the seen energy for the Witchblood Stone card is family or magical connections, valuing the past, and spiritual awakening. Family or magical connections are forged through shared experience, and we may need to take some time to appreciate them in our life. Valuing the past may mean taking the time to see how far we have come in our practice and recognize what has brought us to where we are right this moment. And spiritual awakening may mean we are about to experience an epiphany, a sudden realization which leads to profound change in how we relate to the world around us. The unseen energy for the Witchblood Stone card in a reading is family or magical connections, need for forgiveness, and dormancy. Family and magical connections are needed by all of us, but it may be time to evaluate which ones are healthy for us at this particular time in our life. Need for forgiveness may mean that we need to forgive someone for a past wrong or learn to forgive ourselves, or it may mean that we need to seek forgiveness from someone that we have wronged. And dormancy may mean that your personal witchblood is still asleep, waiting to be awakened by your spiritual practices. Before we go, we would like to present you with a tip or trick or witchy hint. Just something to make your day go better, because we live in a mixture of the magical and the mundane.
Today's tip, trick, or witchy hint discusses the idea of what makes essential oils so essential. Now, before we get started, any ingredient or tool or witchy gadget that we ever talk about is never required for you to work magic or have a ritual, and does not make you a witch if you have it or don't have it. But you find that the bells and whistles are a lot of fun. Essential oils are basically an oil of a plant product that has been distilled in some way to create an oil. An essential oil, in other words, is the essence of the plant. And while some of them smell wonderful and are great for all kinds of things, from anointing candles for a spell or ritual, or to create an anointing oil, they're not required. However, if you're going to use them, it's worth considering the slightly extra cost to get an essential oil and not some watered down version of a scent or a scented oil unless you're wearing it as a perfume. The best way to tell if an essential oil is 100% essential oil is to actually read the label or do your research. Just because it's available at some local metaphysical store does not mean it is a pure essential oil. Essential oils can be used for all sorts of things. Like I said, one of the most common is for anointing candles for a spell, where if you're doing a spell to draw something to you, you rub down from the top and up from the bottom. And if you're using it to send something away from you, you rub from the middle out to the edges before you light it. And obviously, essential oils have similar correspondences to the actual herb or plant that is used to make them. Some essential oils end up being a lot more expensive than others, and it has to do with such factors as how easily you can harvest a plant, the amount you need to produce the oil, whether you have to harvest it at a specific time of day to get the particular plant yield to have the highest amount of oil, and even the rarity of the plant. I mean, when you think about it, one of the most common complaints is rose essential oil is so expensive. But when you think about it, it takes about 5,000 pounds, not roses, pounds of rose petals. And knowing how light rose petals are, think of how many that actually is to make literally 16 ounces of rose essential oil. And if you buy one of those little bottles of essential oil, that's literally about a half an ounce. So it really adds up in price. We have on the path created an essential oil recipe over the years that we use for anointing ourselves as the start of ritual. And because we made it ourselves, the actual scent has come to mean a mental signal for us to start ritual, or the ritual is about to begin, magic is going to happen, all that fun stuff that we talk about when we talk about the opening part of a ritual. So I thought I would share it here, and it will be in the after the show notes that are available on our website. Our anointing oil recipe is as follows. Use 1 milliliter of any kind of base oil. Very often you can stretch, for want of a better word, the use of your essential oils by mixing them with a base oil. So let's start there for a second and talk about base oils. People use jojoba oils, olive oil, grapeseed oil, any of those organic ones that don't have a smell of their own. Okay, so for the anointing oil recipe, you need 1 milliliter of base oil, 14 drops of sandalwood oil, 5 drops of rose oil, 2 drops of frankincense oil, and a small piece of myrrh resin. You're going to mix those all together gently stored in a non-clear bottle. You often see those little brown-colored bottles of essential oil. There's a reason for that. The potency and shelf life, for want of a better word, of an essential oil can be greatly decreased if it's exposed to too much light. So here's an extra hint for you. If you want to buy essential oils for yourself, don't keep them on a shelf in your kitchen windowsill. Put them away somewhere where it is dark, unless you are using them for something. So again, what makes an essential oil essential is the effect of the distilled process that creates the essence of the plant's oil for use in your magic or life in general. But remember, you don't need them to be a witch. Well, it looks like the coffee cups are empty for this week. We hope you join us again next Tuesday. But you can find us at our website, 2youngcrones.com. That's the number 2, Young Crones.
You can also find us on social media such as Facebook and Twitter.
Until then,
remember,
we are witches who work with energies to effect change.
We are believers in both immanent and transcendent divine.
We are celebrants of the passage of the solar and lunar cycles.
We are hedge walkers who pass back and forth between the worlds of the magical and the mundane.
We are seekers of knowledge.
We are walkers of a spiritual tradition we call the Path. So it be.